Hello everyone and welcome back to Algebra Geometry 2. I'm Mr. Keeney and we are continuing our unit on quadrilaterals, and today is a good organization day. There's no new or no more quadrilaterals we're going to be talking about this unit. We're going to be reviewing all those types of quads that we've talked about and kind of organize them in a way that makes sense of what is the most broad and the most specific, and how does this family all work together. So it says use the following terms, which is just all the shapes we have, to create this hierarchy. So I'm going to kind of help you out here, organize of where do all of these fit. Now I'm going to start off with this very top one, as you can imagine, and say that we are talking about quadrilaterals. So the quadrilateral unit that we're talking about groups these special types of quads into really three main things. So that's why you're seeing three main arrows. So the first one, I'm going to go in order that we talked about them. The first one we talked about were parallelograms. Parallelograms, those are the ones that had opposite sides, both pairs of opposite sides that were parallel. And then from there, we broke down parallelogram a little bit more. We talked about good old rectangles, which were parallelograms with four equal angles, and we talked about rhombuses or rhombi, however we say that in the plural form. But those were the two possibilities. In rhombus, they had four equal sides. Now, when rectangles and rhombuses shared the same property, when we had a shape that was not only a rectangle, but at the same time a rhombus, they had equal angles and equal sides, that is our most specific one we can get, the most structured shape in this unit, which is the square. And after that, that was about our, I'm trying to remember if that was like 8.3, 8.4, 8.3 and 8.4, something like that. I'm losing it. But after we got done with those lessons, then we moved to different types of quads. So we start back up at the top of the quads and says, well, there's got to be something else than parallelograms that we can get more specific, and absolutely you could. We talked about last time about trapezoids. They had only one pair of opposite sides parallel, and there was a very special type of trapezoid, which I spelled incorrectly for a second, isosceles trapezoids, which those said they're trapezoids, but their legs were congruent, so the non-base sides. And then our last one we talked about last week were kites, consecutive congruent. So when we take a look here, quads got really grouped into three groups. So from quads, we went to trapezoid, parallelogram, kites, and then trapezoid has one extra level it can go, and parallelograms got a whole bunch there with rectangles, rhombus, and square. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie this all together and take a look at this information here. And as you're going through this, I want you to pause and try to answer these before I do. That's the good thing about these videos. And I'm going to go ahead and go through and explain what kind of quadrilateral these are and try to explain my thinking. We want the most specific name. So I'm not going to go here and answer quad to all of them. I want the most specific is going to be the correct name here. So when looking at this one here, number one, I'm looking at it, and the first thing that jumps out to me is that I have opposite angles that are congruent. I have those pair congruent, and I have those pair congruent. And there is only one kind of quadrilateral that has that, which those are parallelograms. So I'm immediately to the second group. After a quad, I'm going to say it's definitely a parallelogram. And so right now when I'm looking at, I'm like at this stage right now. I went past quad and I said, okay, parallelogram. So the next thing I'm thinking, okay, is it one of these two? Is it rectangle or is it rhombus? And so let me go back and take a look at it now. Well, I got a pair of opposite sides congruent, but that doesn't really give me anything. And there's nothing here that says the four sides are congruent and the four angles are congruent. So actually parallelogram looks to be as far as we can go, just because the opposite angles were congruent. And that's okay. Sometimes that's as specific as we can get. All right, number two, there's really two big things I'm seeing here. So I'm seeing this, which you might be thinking, well, that's one thing. Those pieces, they are congruent, but also on top of it, this right here, this diagonal is, wow, that was a bad outline. Let me try that again. This diagonal is being cut in half, just like this one is. So diagonals are bisecting each other. So that would be parallelogram. So again, I'm thinking parallelogram, maybe. But I can get more specific because all four parts are the same. That means diagonals bisecting each other, and the diagonals, the whole things themselves are congruent. So I'm going to go through this. Actually, that's not going to look pretty when I upload these notes. Let me use the eraser tool. That'll be easier. This is a rectangle because the diagonals bisect each other and the diagonals are congruent. So when you see all four of those little tick marks are the same, that is a rectangle. All right, going to the next one here. Number 3 looks like I do have a parallelogram. I know it's a parallelogram because opposite sides are congruent, and on top of that, all 4 sides are congruent. So I'm right now thinking, I'm thinking it's a rhombus because all 4 sides are congruent. And let's use what we know here. So I'm going to do some deducing because this is a right angle. Well, since it's a parallelogram, I know this has to be a right angle because opposite angles are congruent. But on top of that, these consecutive angles, and really this one, I can do this too, that's a bad line. Let me try it one more time. Those have to be add up to equal 180. Well, if that's 90, 90 plus 90 is 180, and the same reason 90 plus 90 is 180. And that means we got all 4 angles are right angles, so it's a rhombus and a rectangle, which means this is a square. And I do want to point out in these right here, I'm not looking like, you might look at number 2 and number 3 like, that doesn't look like rectangle, that doesn't look like square. I am using the same shape. You'll notice all these are the same shape, and I'm just using the markings. And I want you to go off the markings, not what it looks like here. Okay, on this one, looks like I only have 1 pair of opposite sides. So right now we're thinking, okay, trapezoid, because it has only 1 pair. And on top of that, these would be the legs, and they're congruent, so I actually can say this is, I keep wanting to say isosceles. So it's an isosceles trapezoid. Okay, moving on. Well, okay, right off the bat, opposite angles congruent. We got a parallelogram, so I'm going to write out my thinking. I see opposite angles congruent, parallelogram. And then I'm going to check, can I go any further than this? Well, I got this side and this side congruent, but it's a parallelogram, so I can go like across to say, okay, this side would be congruent and this side would be congruent. So all 4, now let me use red, all 4 sides are congruent, so that does get me another one. That is rhombus. And I don't see a way we can get rectangle, so we're going to stop here at rhombus. And then let's see, oh, this is a little bit of a tricky one. So it almost like, I almost looked at it and said opposite sides congruent, but it's not. You'll see the consecutive sides are congruent, and that only happens in one of our special quads, which is a kite. And there's we can't go further than kite as far as specifics, so we end there. So today is about looking at these. If you have questions on how I'm coming to these conclusions, maybe rewatch the video and reach out to me. Let me know if you have questions, and you have some on your assignment to practice for yourself. So I'm going to leave you guys there. If you have any questions, again, please contact me, and have